There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
So here we are with episode 5 of Lexington Behind the Curtain, and we have the teacher of all teachers, Wildcat Love, Marian Sims. So now we first met as both of our world was involved with the Lexington Dream Factory, and I had dinner with you at BD's Mongolian Grill. This was 11 or 12 years ago. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever met you. And by the end of it, I was in love. I mean, you're just delightful and you're a light in the world.
Oh my God, how precious.
So we've been friends on Facebook ever since.
We have.
And I keep in touch with you there. But you've got a really cool story to tell. And, we talked about it off camera that, interviewing a retired school teacher, on surface is kind of like, well, that's not overly exciting, but you've led a really cool life and you've touched a lot of people, and the people you've touched have touched a lot of people. So I wanted to tell your story a little bit, because I think there's a lot of people out there that might know you, but may not know all the really good stuff about you. And we like to say this podcast is shining a light on good people doing great things.
Oh, that's nice.
So this is where I give you the chance to tell me your resume, tell me your elevator speech, so to speak.
Well, you said that I touch a lot of people. A lot of people have touched me, and I feel like I'm a product of them. After 32 years in public school, I feel like those children and those parents and those schools, they shaped me into this person who...
Now, you were mainly at Castee, though, right?
I was at Castee for 16 years, Morton for 16 years.
Okay.
And I was at Northern for a few years. So maybe I was at Castee maybe more like 14 years.
Yeah. So you actually probably had some kids in elementary that you followed to middle.
Oh, yes, I did. I have 3 or 4 classes where I had, because I taught fourth grade at first, and then I taught them 6th grade. So I have a couple of classes that I taught 2 years, and by the time you teach kids 2 years in a row, you feel like you gave birth to them. They are your people. And I still, and of course they are 55 years old now.
Oh, wow.
But they're movers and shakers in Lexington. I love them so much. Andy Beshear is one of my babies.
Yeah, yeah.
And Tyler Richmond, I have so many just great people that are doing doctor and lawyer and politician things. Yeah. But I have amazing children that have become the greatest mothers and daddies. And I see them on Facebook. Mm-hmm. I live my life through Facebook.
It's awesome.
Years ago,
it was a bad thing, but I think it's really evolved into a great social thing.
And I have to say, I've never had a negative thing on Facebook ever. And I love it because I get to go on their vacations. When I had the billboard, people jumped on and asked me to be their friend, and I had 150 friends. And by the time all that billboard stuff was over, I had 5,000 friends, and they cut me off.
I only have 2,500. You're outdoing me,
but it's about those children.
Yes.
So I get to go on their vacations. Mm-hmm. I see their weddings. Sometimes I go into the delivery room with depending on the husband.
Yep.
I mean, and I get to see their kids graduate from high school and go to college and choose a fraternity sorority. I mean, Facebook is just a wonderful thing for me. And now that I'm older and I'm more sedentary and I'm not out there seeing and doing, I get to see it and do it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is fun.
You mentioned Andy Beshear. So his mother, Jane, the former first lady.
Love her.
Dear friend. And I had the opportunity to go horseback riding with her and Austin Kerr. Yes. I took my wife and 2 daughters.
Yeah.
So my oldest daughter, her horse got a little, not away from her, but got it to where she was nervous. Jane saddled up next to her like she was her grandmother, put that horse between her horse and the fence, calm my daughter down. I mean, it was like a thing of beauty. And I've got so much respect for that family.
She's a terrific grandmother.
Yes.
And she's skilled, highly skilled, and teacher. I mean, she knows what to do.
Yeah. She's been very, very good to me. We've had a great friendship and been a long-term client of our business. So I'm a big fan of the Beshear family.
Yeah.
So.
You got a great business.
We're working on it. You talk about mentoring, in this podcast in your episode 5. So I've already interviewed 4 people in front of you. And I really intentionally have been trying to be a little diverse with who we're interviewing because, I put a list of 25 people together and 18 of them were 60-plus-year-old white guys. And I was like, that's not what I want to be. You know, I want those people are relevant for sure, and you know, good people. But I definitely wanted to mix it up. And I was on Facebook, and you popped up, and I'm like, there's somebody that would be really cool, you know, and not that you're like the queen of diversity or anything, but you're definitely different to interview. You know. A teacher touches so many things and you build so many things, and you definitely don't get the credit, right? The teachers never get the credit that they need. And I told you the story of one of my high school teachers coming to visit my business a couple of years ago. You know, he's in his 80s and he drove up from Louisville to spend the day with me and to go to lunch. And at the end of the day, he told me how proud of me he was. And because my business is based in physics, right? So my high school physics teacher is kind of where all this got started. And I did cry, you know, I mean, I was like this guy that, you know, 30 years ago had that much of an impact on me. And here I am. And now I've got 30 plus employees, and a lot of them are young men that need to be mentored. And, you know, so that's part of what I'm doing is I'm trying to, you know, I had Stuart Perry on, and
love him.
Stuart, we've been friends 25 years, and he has at different points in time mentored me in different ways. And, you know,
he's mentored a lot of people.
And he has. And that's, you know, the episode I titled The Kingmaker, because Stuart has been very, very good in his career at promoting other people, lifting.
He's good.
He doesn't need to be the guy out in front.
He's great. He had a daddy like that too.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I didn't know his father well, but.
Yeah, I knew him well.
But the other cool thing about this is in high school, I interviewed one of my uncles that was a Vietnam vet, and it was a school project that I had to do. And I learned so much about him in a 45-minute interview that I had no idea. Yeah. And in doing this, it's almost like, I don't want to say for posterity because that's a little bit arrogant, but we're getting to talk about things that you may not organically tell somebody, you know? I mean, how often do you get interviewed in your life, right? You know, I mean, how many times? And we interviewed Keith Yarber. He was episode 4. And one of the things he and I off camera talked about at length was Larry Childs. I love Larry Childs. Marty and Andrew.
I had these kids in my classroom too.
Yeah, and they're all the whole family. And I really regret that I didn't start this in time to interview Larry, because Larry would have been a wonderful interview. And Keith and I talked about that. You know,
you've missed some giants, and recently we've lost giants in this community.
Well, and that's, you know, so I'm trying once a week to interview somebody.
You're doing the God work.
Hey, it's cool. So 32 years of teaching.
I'm still teaching.
Are you still teaching?
I coordinate a master's program and teach. I'm faculty at Morehead State University.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so I get to still be in classrooms. I don't get to teach, but I get to watch teachers teach, and I get to mentor teachers, and it's wonderful. It's not a student teaching situation. It's like I could take you with your physics background and your degree, and I could put you in a high school in 20 minutes, and you would be fully certified. This is this No Child Left Behind program that puts qualified teachers in schools without having them go through the whole teaching thing.
Yeah.
And we need teachers so desperately, and especially in the math and science areas. So you probably should have been a teacher because you're a people person. Well, you probably should have been a teacher.
So pre-COVID, there were a couple of ladies with Fayette County Public Schools that had me going into the high schools and talking to the guys and girls about jobs in the trades, you know, and
but this is a great physics trade.
Oh, I mean, I have a young man that works for me that's 19 years old that came to me as a co-op student his senior year of high school, graduated early. He's been here 2.5 years. At 19 years old with no debt whatsoever, he made $60,000 last year.
Praise
God. Because he works hard and he gets up every day. He never calls in sick.
And he's smart.
And all of our guys are paid on performance. So, you know, I know people that have master's degrees that didn't make $60,000 last year.
Oh, please. I work with a lot of higher ed people, and they don't make that kind of money.
The trades, you know, it's a very respectable place to be.
And I think we've done a terrible injustice telling people they have to go to college.
We've
done a terrible thing, and we've made them feel like they're less people, and they're not. And they're
and it's funny. There's an age gap from about 30 to 40. So I've got several employees in their 40s and 50s. Most of my staff is under 30. Between 30 and 40, for some reason, there's an age gap there that there's not a lot of people involved in the trades. But the younger generation is starting to see the value in it.
Of course.
They're starting to devalue a traditional college.
I think we're teaching them better. We're mentoring them better.
Yeah. a lot of these young men need mentors. I mean, they come in and we do things. Somebody recently told me that we're the Chick-fil-A of HVAC, right? And I took that as a huge compliment.
That is huge.
We train our guys on soft skills, and my guys are going to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and please and thank you, and
tuck their shirtail in.
And we really work on that kind of stuff.
Nice. It's wonderful.
And little things like if we're at your house working and the trash people come and take your trash, my guys are supposed to take your trash cans in for you. That's a little thing, but a lot of our customers are older.
Lovely, really.
And that's that little thing. It's like Chick-fil-A when they say "my pleasure" when you say thank you.
Oh, I love that.
You notice
I love
right?
that. I notice it. Yeah.
So in your storied career, you said you named off a bunch of different folks, but who do you think your most famous former student is? Well,
probably at this time, it's probably Andy Beshear.
Yeah.
I have some very cutting edge doctors. Tyler Richmond is the great cardiologist, and you put me on a spot because in 32 years, I've had some giants. I've had a wonderful, the police chief. I love him. He was one of my babies.
Oh, really?
Lawrence Weathers.
Okay.
And I love him. And I was at went to Bryan Station. So I got to give him a Hall of Distinguished Alumni Award just recently. Cool. And it made me cry because he was a little boy in a classroom filled with 29 or 30 kids. And he stood out because he was compassionate and sweet and kind and athletic, of course. I mean, I just think that I have so many I said they shape me. I watch them and I watch them grow, and I'm delighted. The one president of the Junior League was the first Black woman that has ever been the president of the Junior League. I was so honored. The Junior League has been one of my loves. So I'm excited. I was excited about that. That was several years ago. So I feel like we've made a difference in how people think about what their responsibilities are toward Lexington and God and everybody else.
Well, that's huge. And a teacher who has a student in their class for a full year, you've got that ability to impact,
yes.
But it's a choice, right? We all had bad teachers too, and my daughter, who's at Lexington Catholic, she loves her teachers, almost all of her teachers. There's one or two that she didn't absolutely love, but she mainly loves her teachers. And on the way to school this morning, she was going on and on about one particular teacher who's really engaging, and if he feels like the kids are nodding off or whatever, he'll yell for the rest of the class, not in an angry way. He's just,
come on.
Oh, I guess we're going to have to talk at this volume now,
Oh, I love that.
And she was laughing and joking. And I love seeing that she's truly engaged in that class.
Anne Tramontine, who's now the principal of Christ the King, she's one of my babies.
Is she really?
And I love her. I could go on and list lots because my people are 50s and 60s.
Well, I was going to say
retired policemen.
Well, it's like we said, it's almost like a pyramid, right? You touch those people, and they touch, and I'm very excited to see her at Christ the King because they've gone through a round of a couple of principals over there that
and she loves them, and they love her.
Oh yeah.
The parents love her.
We were there when our kids were younger, but now we're at Catholic. It's really nice to see somebody that she's the right person at the right time. So that's awesome. I told you there's no gotcha questions, but I'm gonna make you think. We're gonna talk about some of them. So 32 years. If you could go back in time to I guess when we got out of student teaching, you're probably 24, 25, and give 25-year-old Marian some advice. On what the next 30 years of your life is going to be like. What conversation? If you were sitting across the table from you at that age. What would you say, how would you sculpt, how would you mentor that young woman?
Well, I've had some brilliant children in my life, but early on, I would have helped myself understand that it's not about what you say or what you teach them. They won't remember what I taught them in the classroom. I'm just scaffolding some information that'll serve them later. But what I am doing, the most important thing, this is what I would tell myself. Most important thing is that help them love the way they feel when they're with you. It's not important what I teach. It's more important how I make them feel when they're in my presence.
Okay.
And they say, here, this is a quote that I quote to my students at Morehead. They never care how much you know until they know how much you care.
We use that with our employees.
You've heard that so much. So in teaching, it's like that. And young teachers, I think, are more academic focused. Not that you shouldn't be. And I think I was a very strict academia kind of, and I taught English and prepositions.
My worst subject.
and I let them think that this is a regret. Memorizing the 57 prepositions was the most important thing in their life for a minute. And I thought, now I'm looking back, I'm thinking, did that matter? I have kids all over the world that can say, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, am, would, could, should, may, might, must, have, has, had, do, did, does, will, shall, can. Those are the helping verbs.
Yep.
I think
that's hilarious, by the way.
So one day, one of my kids, Kristen Geiler, who has a little wonderful dress shop here in town.
Oh, her daughter was in my daughter's class at Christ the King. And
her husband is one of my children, and he's a doctor. He's a fabulous doctor. So she said, you could have a group of people together and they could just say it in unison. And I thought, that's
my wife and I joke all the time. A Baloo is a bear, a Yonker is a young man, and Tawuzzle means mix. You remember those? The KEST test?
Yes.
So I'm a little younger than I'm in my late 40s, but I remember we had all those in 4th and 5th. And,
sixth grade. Sixth grade was huge.
So boring.
And 6th grade, I love the middle school, and a lot of elementary teachers should be middle school teachers. Middle school is the worst time of a kid's life.
I have an 8th grader right now.
If you can love them enough, they start loving themselves, and it changes their behavior.
We are dealing with that. My two daughters are 17 and 13. And my 17-year-old, I describe her like a cat, right? She gives you attention and affection when it's her choice. My younger daughter's a puppy. She feels all the feels, and she's got all the emotion,
And she'll turn into a cat at one point.
Maybe, she's, throughout her whole life, she's been, just a very living kid, but a happy kid,
right.
And she's in 8th grade, and we're having those boy-girl conversations and things.
That's great.
Yeah. But, it's as a dad, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl, and I'm the youngest by 10 years. I have 8 nephews, and then I end up with two daughters, so
you should.
God wanted me to have little girls, I guess.
I think the biggest impact on a girl is the daddy.
So I like to say that the biggest impact on my daughters is how I treat my wife.
So that's huge.
We literally last night we were sitting around.
That's huge.
And talking about, we have some friends going through a divorce and some other stuff, and life's hard, right? You go through challenging things. And my wife looked at my daughter and she looks at me and she goes, "Your daddy's obsessed with me, and I want you to find a man that's obsessed with you because he'll never leave. He'll never quit. He'll never give up." Because now I'm getting... I
know, and he'll give you the greatest
But
gifts.
she, and that's been a lot of our relationship is we really are each other's person, and that's what I want my girls to want, when they go find that mate,
We did Fellowship of Christian Athletes at the high school for 15 years at Henry Clay and at the University of Kentucky for 15 years. And I have so many stories about that whole time in my life with those kids. But the kids used to just hang at my house. And on Sunday, because they didn't feed the athletes at UK, I would have dinner, Fellowship of Christian Athletes dinner, and I would cook. Sometimes I would just get buckets of chicken, and sometimes I would fix the pot roast and stuff. But the kids loved to come and just eat and stuff. And then recently, some of the girls have come back just to hang, and some of them have gone through divorce. And so I had a group that graduated like in the 90s, and several of them had been divorced. And one of them said, "You know what? We were worried about trying to find a husband like Glenn Sims." And said, "There's no one that was my husband. And there's nobody that could be like Glenn Sims." And we failed. We tried to find Glenn Sims and we failed. So I love you saying the impact that you have on those girls, the way you treat your wife, because that's the power in the home.
It's huge.
Because you have to love her and treat her first and best, so that that filters down to them.
Yeah. Well,
and if you had a boy, it'd be just like that. We have a son, and he's a loving, tender guy, because Glenn Sims was a loving, tender guy. And they're 6'5" and 6'7" people. They're huge people, but they're tender-hearted people.
Well, and it's funny. My mother was the dominant force in my parents' marriage.
Yeah.
She was my dad was very, very laid back.
Yeah.
And he worked the assembly line at GE his whole life, and she worked for PNC Bank or whatever it is now. And my wife has a very strong will. She's a very passionate person. And I think that because my mother was such a strong woman, that's what I knew I would end up with. Yeah. Well, now I'm looking at my daughters, and they're very strong. Yeah, they've got it in spades.
They got the best of both worlds.
They really did.
And they saw you appreciate that, so they'll be looking for somebody that can appreciate that, which is a great formula.
Well, I also preach, growing up, I had a lot of friends that got into drugs early on, and I didn't live, I grew up in Shepherdsville outside of Louisville, and I wasn't in Section 8.
I go there.
Yeah.
I go there.
I wasn't in Section 8 housing, but you could see it from my front porch, so we were lower middle class, and a lot of my friends, I had several friends that overdosed on drugs before they were in their 20s, and I never did any of that. And part of that was my parents were both very, very clean freaks. Like we had you could eat off the floor of our house. My mother was a Nazi about me brushing my teeth and trimming my fingernails and little things like that.
That's good.
So when I'm 12 years old and I'm on that rooftop and the 6 guys that I'm with are passing a joint around at 12, right?
Yeah, you said no.
And I'm like, I won't drink after you. Why in the world would I hit that? The other 5 of you
put
just
my
put in
lips
your
on
no,
that.
no,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
never did, and never had any interest in it. And both my wife and I are kind of like that as far as hygiene. Our house is really clean, and our daughters, that is their expectation of a mate or a man.
Yeah.
And I've told numerous people, I tell employees this all the time. Being a clean freak my whole life has kept me out of trouble and kept me out of doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And you're never, cleanliness is next to godliness, right?
Yes.
And I tell my girls, you're never, ever going to regret being a clean freak. I know it's something silly and maybe even stupid.
No, it makes perfect sense.
But I know that I had so many people that went down a dark road that I could have chosen that path easily. The number one reason I didn't is number one, I don't care about peer pressure. But number two is hygiene. It was gross, so.
Yeah. Well, that was good. Our son was always an athlete, and he was my husband's best friend. And it was really interesting now that he's a man. My son is a Commonwealth attorney in Jasmine and Garrett County.
Okay.
The elected one.
Okay.
And he looks back on his childhood, and he says, really, my only friend was my father. And Glenn was the one that never smoked, never drank till he was an adult, and drank very little. And I think that set a tone. Glenn, my husband was raised in the projects, and Al Pruitt took him out of the projects in the 7th grade because he was 6'5" and said, you can play basketball at Henry Clay.
Yeah.
And he was so poor, but, he'd played basketball in the projects all those years, so he could play with anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of helped him develop this lifestyle of hard work, like you.
Yeah.
You have to work hard when you're poor.
Absolutely.
And I think Andy certainly learned from that.
That's really cool. I didn't realize that he was the Commonwealth attorney. You must be very proud.
I am. Oh, my goodness. He's wonderful. And my husband would burst with pride. I mean, he was,
Now, do you have grandbabies?
No.
He needs to get on that.
No, yeah. Well, he's kind of getting older, and he always has some lovely companions, but he's not bent on marriage. I thought when Glenn died, he'd run out and get married immediately, just have a family, because our family's tiny.
Yeah.
It's Marian and Glenn, and Marian and Andy, and there's not much family.
So,
but I have a family of friends out there.
All your babies.
Oh, my God. I love them, and they include me in their Thanksgivings and their dinners and their Christmases, and it's good. It's good.
You've got quite the following. My family's the opposite. My dad was one of 17 children.
Oh, my God.
My mom, we're Catholics.
You sound like the Mullins and the Jeters.
My mom was one of 10. So I am one of 109 first cousins. So not super close to many of them, but
Are they around Lexington?
Bardstown. Yeah, they're all in the Bardstown area. So
and are they
Nelson
all Clarks?
Spaldings. Clarks, my mother's family were Bray. And then we've got Devers, Nally, DeWitt. My grandmother was a Masterson. My dad's dad was actually born on February 29th.
So he was a young person.
Yeah, when he died at 84,
he was just 12.
He was only 16. He only had 16 birthdays, which was cool.
That is cool.
But it's funny. I look almost nothing like my father. My dad could have won a Johnny Cash lookalike contest. Deep, dark skin, black hair, Indian features. I look nothing like him. I look exactly like his father. So it like skipped a generation.
Yeah.
My dad's dad, who I never met, he died before I was born. But he was German, Scottish descent. And I did that ancestry DNA thing, which is really fun. You should do that.
No, I haven't
I'm
done
like
that.
18.
Maybe I'll find more relatives.
I'm like 18% Viking, So we've got to.
Eric.
That's why I
Eric
don't
the Red.
tan whatsoever. Yeah,
that's good.
What today and these days, other than teaching and things, what's your passion? What do you enjoy the most about what you do today?
Well, because I'm still working, my passion is my work, my friends. Deeply spiritual, pray, have prayer warriors.
Where do you go to church?
Set aside. Southland is kind of home for me.
Okay.
Maxwell Street Presbyterian Church grew me.
Okay.
And I love that. But I think we can find Jesus everywhere, and I look for him.
Yep.
One of my babies is Melinda Mersack, and she's a rabbi.
Oh, neat.
And so, I loved her and her sisters. I had them in my class, and then I went to her wedding in Cincinnati. And she's just wonderful. But I contacted her today because I wanted information about my Jewish friends and what they were experiencing, because I was worried about how I was talking to them. I didn't, I listen to the news and watch the news like you do, and I don't think I have enough understanding to talk about it or think about it. It's horrible.
It really is.
And I want to understand what she thinks.
Yeah.
Because if I thought I would open my mouth and say anything that would offend my Jewish loves, I would die.
Yeah.
My Jesus was a little Jewish boy.
Yes, he was. I like that. Years ago, I had a receptionist who was very, very sweet, but was not very wise on the ways of the world. And we had a customer who's a prominent Jewish citizen here in town, who's a super nice guy. And he was in the office for some reason, and she was talking about how she just got off the phone with somebody who was trying to Jew her down, right? She had no clue that it was offensive, right? And he was so kind.
That's the worst part.
Yeah, he was so kind. It's Jeff Kaplan here in town. He's doing a bunch of Subways.
Yes.
And he stopped her and he said, "Okay, I know you didn't mean that the way that I heard that. So I want to educate you." And if more people would do that and not look to be offended, because so many people are looking to be offended. And she was so embarrassed, once he explained it. And I'm sure they're still friends today, right? And that was probably 18 years ago. But I hear exactly what you're saying. I've got several friends of the Jewish faith, and I just don't know much about what's going on, and
maybe you'll ask one.
You know what? I will probably do that after having this conversation. So one of whom I plan on doing a podcast with later on. So I need to give her a phone call and fill her out on, I definitely, and maybe this is me making too many assumptions, but I definitely side with Israel in the situation. I think that the Palestinian attacks and I don't think that's warranted, and I don't know about the history of 1948 and all the stuff that went on after World War II and what happened during World War II. But in 2024, it's wrong to throw bombs at your neighbors, right? I don't see any way we can justify that. It's same with what was going on in Russia and Ukraine.
We're grieving for little Palestinian children.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of grief we can share on every front, and we just need to figure out how to think about those things.
Yeah.
And I think asking questions is probably a whole lot better than saying something.
Well, and good for you for doing that soul searching. It's like, hey, I don't know what I should be feeling about this, but I trust you to help educate me. Because so many people just make assumptions. So good on you. UK basketball. So I know you're a big fan.
Big fan.
I was
on that board for 12 years.
Were you really?
Of trustees. Now I'm on the National Alumni Board, and I'm still I'm fifth generation UK graduate.
Are you? That's awesome.
So we're all about that. My husband worked with the UK when he came out of...
were you a sorority at UK?
No.
Okay.
He came out of the Vietnam situation. We married when we were 12 years old. In Kentucky, you can do that.
Yeah.
So it was all during the war, the Vietnam thing. And when he came out of that a conflict, he said he wrote Adolph Rupp a letter and said, could I come and I'm going to go on the GI Bill, and because he was from the project, I'm going to come in the GI Bill, and I'll do anything if I can just work with that ball team, because I played sports my whole life. And so Adolph never wrote him, but Joe Hall did.
Yeah.
Joe Hall wrote him a letter, and we still have it. And it said, when you come, I'll have a place for you. I'll even have scholarship money for you. I'll buy you books, and it'll be fine, and you'll be a manager for me. So he was Adolph's last manager in an assistant capacity. His pictures, even in the paper, with him putting on Adolph's coat on the last day of practice.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
he was Joe Hall's first 3 years manager. Yeah. And of course, then his life took off from there, because Joe Hall took care of him and helped him and mentored him. And it was a good relationship.
So I'm a big fan of Joe Hall.
Oh, I am too.
Do you know where his first coaching job was?
Regency?
Shepherdsville High School.
Oh.
Yeah, which when I was there was Shepherdsville Middle School.
I was thinking about college. He was at Regents or something.
But they actually, the street that the middle school that I went to is now Joe B. Hall Lane.
Oh, so, I love that.
Now, I did just have the opportunity to tour the locker rooms, and I had toured them prior to the 2012 national championships.
Oh, this is a whole new world.
After 2012, they got all kinds of money. But it used to be the UK team would come out of their locker room and the visiting team would come out behind them the next room over. And Joe Hall had lowered the door on the UK door frame and raised it on theirs. So all of our big, tall guys are having to duck to come out of the locker room. And these guys are like, just to get in their heads.
Is that a true story?
That is a true story. Yes. And
I did not know that.
Then they took it away with this remodel. So I was really disappointed, because I took one of my staff and we got to go tour, and I was telling the story in advance. And in the locker room now, it looks like it's the Ritz-Carlton. I mean, it's
fabulous. And of course, every guy's 7 feet tall, so it doesn't matter.
That's, they
have to duck going through 7-foot doors.
Well, and it's amazing the height difference. Like, I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'3", and Randolph Morse is a good friend of mine and a customer of our business. And we actually share a birthday. So we're birthday buddies. Well, he's 6'10",
Oh, yeah.
And when I hang out with Randolph, I look dwarfed,
like him.
And around the office, most of the girls are 5'2", 5'3", whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm the giant. And then Randolph walks in the room. I'm like, I'm not so big anymore.
Yeah, I think that's why I married Glenn Sims at 12.
Yeah.
Because he was 6'5", and he made me feel petite. And I'm not. There's nothing petite about me, but he made me feel
My wife is 5'9", and she says the same thing.
She loves that. Yes. And she can wear high heels with you, and it's wonderful.
So when we met, as she was getting out of a relationship with somebody she dated for several years, and he was only 5'9". Mm-hmm. So for the first year of our marriage, she wore 3-inch heels everywhere. Everywhere we went. Yeah. So,
yeah. Was your mother tall?
No, my mother was only 5'2", but my dad was 6'1", but his father was 6'4". So I told you, I take after my grandfather for some reason.
And you got everything from
them. My sister's only 5 foot tall, so.
Well, we used to, a lot of the children that hung with us in FCA, one of them was Jamal Mashburn, and Jamal's mother was 6'2". She was a beautiful, giant lady, and she would come and stay at our house, which was NCAA violation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And she would stay in our house, and she would say stuff like, Andy, tall is all. Yeah. The woman gets you the tall children. And then so Andy would bring these little tiny cheerleaders home, and Glenn would just laugh and say, what about the tall girls? Where are they? We're the volleyball players.
My wife would say that's a waste of height.
Yes, yes.
Because our daughters are both tall. My older is almost 5'8", and my younger is almost 5'8".
Oh, so we love that.
At 13.
And maybe she'll be taller.
She's probably, I bet she tops at about 5'10", is what she'll probably end up being.
Well, one of our kids, Derek Cord, remember him?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
He's one of our children. We always had a stocking at the hearth for him at Christmas.
That's awesome.
He's one of my loves. And he didn't have much family, so Glenn and I kind of took him in. But he had a beautiful wife that I helped pick out. And then he had a beautiful daughter that's 6'3" or 4" and played volleyball at UConn.
Okay.
And just giant girls.
Yeah,
we love them. We love them.
When I was in high school, I hung out with the girls' volleyball team. That was the.
We thought Andy would marry a volleyball player.
Yeah. If I'd have stayed in Louisville, I probably would have. I had several good friends that we were buddies in high school and that kind of thing. But I came to Lexington and met a girl from Hazard, and
She's from Perry County?
Oh, she's a Gorman. So
she is a Gorman.
She's Hazard County royalty. Yeah.
That is royalty.
Yeah. Over there on that wall, I've got a Duke of Hazard that's on by the mayor, William D. Gorman. So one of the coolest people I ever got to meet, and so sad. He passed away the year my daughter was born. He was mayor from 77 to 2010 when he passed. And
my father's people from Breathitt County.
Okay, yeah, good people.
Wonderful.
Mayor Gorman had met every president since Kennedy.
Oh,
So,
I can imagine.
Yeah, just amazing guy,
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
We couldn't have Lexington without the mountains.
Not at all. Not at all.
You think of the movers and shakers.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a letter to the editor when Don Webb died, and I said, what are we going to do? These people, and really think about the people in our world, in our tiny Lexington world that we've lost in the last couple of years. It's devastating.
And we talk about the generation. I want to say the generation right behind me, because I've been very involved in nonprofit my whole life and involved with the chamber and the business community. And I feel like there's a big gap there.
There is.
I told you, as I was putting I wrote up my top 25 people that I wanted to do this podcast with, because my goal is to get 250 people and the top 25. And 18 of them were 60 plus year old white guys, and I really, George Jones has that song, Who's Going to Fill Their Shoes, right?
No.
I think we need more 35 and 45 year old people, coming up the ranks. And I know, I was very active in my 20s, and then when we had kids, I had to kind of pull back a little bit. And then of course I started this business, and then I'm more active now. And I know there's certain points in your life where, you've got to focus on your family and your internal. But when I interviewed Stuart, one of the statistics we talked about, do you know that all of the nonprofits in the United States are typically made up by 3% of the community? 3% are the only ones getting involved in nonprofit work. And obviously you're very involved, but you're probably like me. You go into those rooms and you see the same people over and over. So
we see that now. And I love the Junior League because it's trying to attract young women to be involved. But I'm going to tell you, not a lot of young people that are in their 30s and 40s are doing volunteer work. I did volunteer work when I had a little tiny child at home, and I was working, and I was doing the puppets, and I was serving food, and I was doing FCA, and all of that was volunteer. And I don't see volunteerism in the young people now.
And I think COVID has upset some of that. I went to a Rotary meeting.
I'm not giving that a credit.
Well, I went to a Rotary meeting 3 or 4 months ago, and I had joined Rotary when I was 31. Yeah. And I got kicked out when I was 39 because of not showing up to enough meetings.
You couldn't go.
So when I was 31, I went through that lookbook, and they had 365 members.
Yeah.
I was like the 8th youngest guy.
Oh, yeah.
When I got kicked out, I was like the 6th youngest guy. 9 years later, 8 years later, So, I mean, we do need that we need to encourage those folks, that are in their 30s and 40s to do that. You mentioned Junior League. So when I was president of the Dream Factory, I had to go make a presentation, and because they sponsored local charities, and I had to make a presentation. We were asking for a sizable donation, and I went with Carol Russell. I'm sure you know Carol.
Yes, of course.
And they had me talk about why I was part of doing it and what I did. And I told the story of this little girl that, and I'm gonna try not to get touched. We were going to take her. We were going to send her to Disney originally, and then she got sick and she got a little better, and we were going to send her. And this went on for about a year and a half. And finally, the doctors came back to us, and they said she's not going to make it, And we ended up throwing her a birthday party at UK Children's Hospital. Wow. So I tell this story, and of course, at this point, I have 2 daughters of my own.
Oh no, it breaks your heart.
By the end of the story, I am sobbing. I mean, just
how could you not?
sobbing.
How could you not?
And there's like 12 girls in the room, and most of them are crying. And by the end of it, they're like, take our money, take it. So I think they have given us like $25,000, And,
well, Jim Richardson and Stacy, they started the Dream Factory.
So Stuart Perry, Ralph Coldiron, Daryl and Kathy Ishmael. I mean,
it was Stacy and Jim's dream because they lost Taylor. They lost the baby.
Oh yeah.
And then they put all their energy in this thing, and then of course we all got involved, and we were so excited to think it could grow so fast and so big, and now it's just the most lovely thing in the world, and I know
I was on that board.
It was God's work.
It is. I was on the board for 11 years, and I think one of the things that that I feel proud about is when I got involved, there were a lot of the same people that, like half the board were founding board members, and we were 25 years in, right? And I brought a lot of new blood. I recruited a lot of new people. And then there were several of us that, they had their annual gala at Spindletop.
Yes.
And you're kind of landlocked at Spindletop. It's hard to have a lot of people.
I love Winton and Nicholasville. That's fabulous.
We moved it to R.J. Corman's place.
Moved it?
Yeah. And we went from averaging 150 people to averaging 500 people.
Yeah.
And you were bringing in bigger bands and doing other stuff. So I really value the time I had there. But, I think that the group of us that really worked together on that project, we made a big difference in that organization.
Of course you did. And I love how the mantle is passed.
Oh, yeah.
And so are you finding young people to be working in it?
So I haven't been involved with Dream Factory in several years. Okay. Honestly, and this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but as my girls got a little bit older,
then you have to do stuff with them.
Well, the great thing about the Dream Factory is when it started, it was for critically ill children, kids that were dying.
Yes.
Well, they had to change that in the 90s because so many of those childhood cancers they were able to cure. So it was critically and chronically ill, right? And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is good.
But we still were losing kids.
Yeah.
And as I was becoming a young father with my kids, it was really hard on me. I would come home from a board meeting where we found out that we lost one of our kids and scoop my girls up, and it just I got to where it was emotionally challenging to do that anymore.
My mother taught at Shriners Hospital, and when I was pregnant, she taught the Sunday school for like 25 years, and so I did for 7 years. And I said, when I got pregnant, I went for a few months, and then I said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. And for that very reason, I would cry the whole time and worry,
I don't want to say I'm a sensitive guy because that's not the right word for it.
But you are. That's a compliment.
Yeah,
that's not a bad thing.
When it comes to my kids, it's just.
You're a marshmallow.
It's a marshmallow, man. It's a different level.
You need to be. Yeah. That's the good daddy. The good daddy is Glenn Sims was a marshmallow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
He'd cry at a drop of a hat.
My kids tease me because I'll cry when it involves them.
Yes.
And then I cry over patriotic things.
Yes. Yes.
We went to DC and saw the parade and the flyover on 4th of July a couple of years ago, and it was just awe-inspiring. And then I'm a good Catholic boy. I cry at religious things.
Of course, yes.
If you walk into the Sistine Chapel and you're not shedding tears, then you're made of different stuff than
Something's
I am.
wrong.
Yeah, I mean that's just so awe-inspiring.
Yeah. No, we're criers. When Toby Keith died, I cried.
Yeah, we did.
Oh God.
So I'm a cowboy, right? I mean, I'm underdressed today because I literally
you're Superman.
I'm Captain America. I normally don't dress this way, but I had back surgery last week because I was thrown off a horse a year ago. And I herniated a disc, and I tried every way in the world through physical therapy and injections and other stuff. And finally, Greg D'Angelo, my oral surgeon or orthopedic surgeon, he's like, "You've got to get this out of here." So last Thursday they cut me up.
Are you still riding?
I am. They tell me that I'm going to have to take a few weeks off.
Please.
But no, we built a house on 10 acres, and we've got horses in the backyard. Yeah, so we love it.
Wonderful.
And COVID, my wife homeschooled my girls, and by September of 20, I was coming home, and she's staring into the fireplace like, I'm going to kill them. Of course, I did all the shopping. They didn't leave the house. I mean, they took COVID very seriously.
Well, you have to.
And they barely left the house for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And they were going to kill each other. I mean, it was to the point where they were spending way too much quality time.
Yeah.
So she's like,
Get them out on a horse.
I want to start horseback riding lessons. And they did that. And then 3 months goes by, and she goes, I want my own horse. I've wanted my own horse my whole life. And our kids were in Catholic school, so when we decided to homeschool, I told her, I said, put that money aside, the tuition that we weren't paying.
Yes.
And I said, we'll do something nice for you and the girls, because that's, So we took that money and we bought the first horse. 2 years later, we owned 4 horses, a gooseneck trailer, and a farm. So COVID, it changed it. But I had never been on a horse till I was about 46. Oh. And, last year before last, there's rarely a week go by that I'm not on a horse.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so Kentucky.
We love it.
So good. And my Austin and Jane, and they're the precious people.
Well, and of course, they're hunter jumpers and dressage. Yes. We're trail riders, I'll take my horse on trails that hikers won't do. We go real backcountry stuff, and I love it. It's so much fun.
Not on DeLong Road. There's no backcountry
Oh,
on
no,
DeLong
we
Road.
trailer. We trailer. We'll go down to the National Forest and go down to Big South Fork in Tennessee.
Wow, that's impressive.
Up in Stamping Ground, they've got what they call the reservoir. There's no water in it. They call it the reservoir. There's 42 miles of horseback trails up there, and that's a public park.
And you take the girls and everybody does it?
Oh, yeah. All four of us ride.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh, they love
awesome.
it. They love it. And teaching them to care for an animal like that, because horses need a lot of care.
They're huge
and
people.
the girls muck the stalls and they pick the feet and, they do all the heavy lifting.
And I've been doing some research about empathy because I was just drawn to it, probably because of my faith. But then what I realized through research is that empathy doesn't happen. You have to teach it. Like you have to teach kindness, you have to teach empathy, and like a skill, like table manners, you teach empathy and kindness. And the research says empathy cannot be taught to kids without animals.
Really?
In their home.
Well, we have animals coming out our ears, and we have cats and the greatest golden retriever. The greatest golden retriever on the planet. And chickens. We pulled 25 eggs out of the coop last night. So if you want some eggs, I should have brought you some. Yeah, we've got plenty of eggs.
Oh, I love
but we love it, and I like it that I'm close enough to town that I can DoorDash if we want to.
Yeah.
But I'm far enough outside of town that, my nearest neighbor is 1,000 feet.
How close are you to Richmond Road?
I'm on the other end. Yeah. So I'm closer to Tate's Creek.
Armstrong Mill.
Yeah, we're down. We were over by
You're between
Overbrook.
Armstrong Mill and Tate's Creek?
Correct. Yeah. We look over Overbrook. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I love it. It's a lot of fun. You've been around, you've been involved with the community a long time. If you had one thing that you could grab all the community leaders and talk to them about, one piece of advice, what do you think Lexington needs to do to move us forward in the next 5 years?
Well, promote kindness, to be better role models, to demonstrate it, to show it, to help it grow, to support it, to applaud it. I remember 100 years ago, I was on this campaign because I thought the newspaper only showed negativity. And I was upset about that. And I went down this was when the basketball thing was under a lot of scrutiny because they brought all this negative attention to some of the stuff at the basketball program. And
Eddie Sutton era.
No. This was before. Okay. And much of it was unfounded. No, this was before Eddie Sutton, but this was unfounded. It wasn't even true. Well, anyway, you know how the newspaper always picks the negative and they dwell on it. So I went down there and I was fussing at the editor, and at that time he was a friend. I know him. And I said, I'm confused about this. Why won't you talk about the good things? And he said, it's the newspaper's job to point out what's wrong in our culture. And I said, well, that's unfortunate because there's so much goodness going on that I wish you could talk about these great things these young people are doing and the good acts of kindness that are going around all the time and nobody shows them or applauds them. And he said, well, that doesn't sell papers. So I stayed on a campaign about that for many years, but I just don't think we do enough of that. And there's a lot of goodness going on here.
There really is. Well, and
I don't
that's the
mean
whole point
just
of this podcast.
Charitable passing food out to the homeless. I mean, there's some goodness going on that nobody sees and nobody gets applauded for it.
See, that's my whole point of doing this podcast is, like I said at the beginning, I want to shine a light on good people doing great things because, there's a lot of really good people in this town. Jenny Ramsey right down the road down here. I mean, that woman is a miracle. I mean, she's done so many good things.
Yes, yes.
And there's
I almost mentioned her a minute ago.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good people doing a lot of good stuff, and people don't know about it.
Do you know a guy named Bob Cramphill?
The name rings a bell.
Bob and Wendy Cramphill do the most amazing things you have ever heard in your life, and nobody knows about him.
Really?
You ought to have him talk.
Well, get me in touch with him because I'd be very interested.
He spends all his money and time promoting goodness and kindness and supports Jenny. I thought about him immediately because he gets people together to have dinners and bring presents and just does it with his phone.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people.
So we donated the solar on the Catholic Action Center, and
that's wonderful.
we did a big chunk of it, and then
probably nobody paid attention to that.
Not a
Nobody
lot.
gave you credit for that.
Well,
Nobody said
and I didn't do it
synergy,
for the
synergy.
credit. That's not it. But Jenny
Well,
was
it
able to
is.
pay for the remainder of it by calling the 5 donors, and I bet Bob was probably
Bob
one of
was
those.
probably one of them,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
So when they moved into that new facility, their electric bill was $7,000 a month. Yes.
And so what is it now?
So she's been replacing HVAC units and other things in there. It was a poorly built building. It was a Fayette County Police substation.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
And it was built in the late 70s when they weren't running gas and heat pumps weren't as good as they should have been. So there's some other things going on, but I think she's cut it in half, so.
That's great. That's great.
Well, and that's money that can go back to others.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's the whole point about this. We talk about the people in the 30s and 40s and whatever that may not be getting involved. And what I'm trying to do is to highlight people that might be doing things that necessarily don't want credit for it, but if more people see more people doing more, they'll do more too. If that's not a very long-winded statement. Because I think the more you realize the people around you are involved in and doing, the easier it is to say, well, I want to be part of that. I want to be doing something like that. I've mentioned on several podcasts, the Chamber of Commerce Lexington, they have their ambassador group, which is roughly 25 people that, volunteer, and they go out and they do ribbon cuttings and other things. I did that for 3 years in my early 20s, and it was one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah, because you saw goodness every day.
Well, and I saw goodness every day, and I developed relationships. My birthday back in January, I had, 200 people wish me happy birthday.
Yeah.
I bet 25 of the 25 from the Commerce Ambassador Squad from 2003 were on that list that wished me a happy birthday, and I still,
That's wonderful.
on the regular touch.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, and people like Paul Chartier and Bev Clemens and Malia Horde and David Potter. I mean, they're all people that I met through that have turned out to be lifelong relationships, and so giving back gives back to you. And I think people need to, we've become so introverted, everybody's staring at their phone and everybody's, I know people that won't pick up the phone and order a pizza. They don't want to talk to anybody. They pay for their gas at the pump. They order, DoorDash on their phone.
Self-service.
Yes, and it's like, we need to chat more, right?
Yeah,
we need to have these conversations, and I've learned a great deal about you today, and I love that.
Well, we need to love more.
Yes, kindness.
And I think the kindness is an action. A love is an action, but we have to figure out how to get it to people and how to make people, what? There's a whole slew of people that don't feel worthy to be loved, so they can't accept it.
Yeah.
You're teaching your girls to just, when you say I love you, they just melt into it because they feel worthy to receive it. There's a whole population of people who don't receive love and can't work in kindness as an umbrella because they don't feel worthy to receive love.
So my business will be 10 years old next month.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, I've averaged, I don't know, maybe 10 turnovers a year, that we'll hire somebody, fire people, people come and go. And it's astonishing how broken people are, It's so sad. And usually they can put on a good act when you hire somebody. Anybody can interview well. Right. But, you get 90 days in and they start missing work and they start wanting to leave early and come in late. And I mean, it's a pattern. I mean, I'm really good at recognizing patterns. That's one of my skill sets. And, within 30 days, I'm like, all right, well, it's not a popular, it's probably not a very friendly phrase, but I say it's like swirl in the bowl, right? It's like when you flush the toilet, it swirls 2 or 3. Yeah.
They say CTD, circling the drain.
CTD. And I'll see somebody, that fortunately we have the best staff I've ever had. I'm so blessed, knock on wood. We have a wonderful group of young men and women, and I'm so very, very blessed.
And you're mentoring them. That's why they're wonderful.
We are. But as we bring new people in, you interview, like I had 125 applications for a position recently.
Wow.
And I interviewed 12 people in person.
Wow.
And some of those interviews were painful. I mean, painful. Yeah. And I ended up hiring a wonderful young man that I'm really excited about. But you can tell in an interview that someone's broken. I mean, I had 2 or 3 guys come through here that I was just like, oh my goodness, I feel for them. I feel for their families that they're out there living their life that way. And it's like you said, they're almost vampires. They can't absorb that. And if I can pick that up off a 15-minute interview, what's their life like? And I'm like you. It optimistic for our world because it's just who I am. I'm a person of optimism. But I am too. With the elections and the political stuff, I'm afraid for where we are right now. I feel like we need a major shift, and I don't know how to make that happen in this point of AI and social media and all the stuff that we've got. I mean, we need a strong president. Somebody like a Reagan or a Clinton or someone that was very polished and charismatic, a Kennedy, I mean, and that's definitely not what we have to choose from right now, and that makes me sad, but that cycles through as well,
Well, and I keep telling myself, God's in charge.
Yep.
And I know this for a fact. Kids are smarter now. When I hear people say, oh, this generation, I just want to scream. Kids are smarter now than they've ever been in the history of America, history of the world. They are so smart. They're so savvy. They're so intuitive. It's almost scary. So if we channel that in the right direction, if we give them enough goodness to concentrate on, so they're not concentrated on goodness, then...
Well, it's like you don't read the newspaper, right? When you drive a yellow car, you notice all the yellow cars, right?
Yeah.
When a woman's pregnant, she notices all the other pregnant women.
Right.
So when you focus on, and I talk about this in our team meetings,
you see goodness.
When you focus on the good things in your life, when you focus on what's going right, you see more and more, and goodness creates goodness, and being appreciative for your blessings, creates more blessings.
My grandmother said, life is a mirror. You get what you give.
Yes.
You give it sweet, you get sweet back. And if you don't get sweet back, there's something wrong.
Right.
So you have to figure out how to help that image be complete. But it's a good thing to worry about the image you're putting out. You're in charge of your own character, right? And I say that as a business owner, I can take anyone and bring them in and teach them HVAC and teach them solar panels and all the stuff that we do. That's all teachable. I could teach you how to install solar panels. If you bring someone in that has a character problem, I can't fix that. And if we recognize that you have a character problem, you will get your pink slip at the end of the day. I teach my teachers there's some things that you cannot fix.
Yep.
You can't fix disposition. You can hope it comes to you and it's already fixed. Because you can't teach enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You can't teach graciousness. I mean, you can tell them what to say and think, but there's some things that just are intrinsic.
Yes.
They come out and we say, if you don't have these characteristics, you shouldn't be a teacher. Because, if you're hell-bent on just being grumpy,
you're not good for anybody.
You need to probably work in a bank or something.
My banker friends are going to love that.
Luther.
Yeah. Well, I've had a delightful conversation, and I wanted to give you the floor. So as we close our time together, this is going out to social media in perpetuity, right? It's going to live forever. What message do you want to leave the citizens of Lexington, to all your babies, to all the people?
Oh, I love you. I love you. I love you. I just thank you for letting me be me.
Well, that's the most true statement I've ever heard, and we love you. So thank you for your time, and join us next time on Lexington Behind the Curtain.